Welcome to a brand new episode of Starts at the Top, our podcast about leading differently. I'm Paul Thomas.
And I'm Zoe Amma. Our podcast exists to help leaders and their teams understand what they need to do differently today to prepare for the world of tomorrow. We started Starts at the Top as a podcast about digital disruption, but we soon realised that leaders were telling us about something more important and urgent, about how traditional ways of leading have changed forever.
We make it our mission to speak to leaders who are carving out new ways of leading, covering topics from emerging tech to inclusion, from remote work to mental health and resilience, and from climate change to AI. If it's about the status of leadership in 2026, it will be on our podcast.
We're not here for the shiny corporate case studies. We share stories from leaders who have learned lessons and made progress the hard way. And our podcast is here to share ideas and inspire others.
In today's episode, we're sharing our conversation with Pip Wilson, who's tech entrepreneur and co-founder and CEO of Amicable, an online and offline service that is transforming the way people manage separation and divorce.
Pip's work sits right in the middle of today's big questions about AI, control, and human dignity. She and the team at Amicable are using technology, including AI, to open up access to justice and make a really painful process kinder and more affordable. That chimes with the themes we wanted to explore ahead of Pip's interview.
Indeed. So, in terms of articles we've shared back and forth with each other this week, we had Anthropic's co-founder Jack Clark, who has been calling for a permanent cobra for AI inside of the government to think about how AI technology could disrupt everything from our jobs to national security and get to it before it actually happens. We also had, and you sent me this when I hadn't seen the article, so this came out of left field, Pope Leo, who issued his first encyclical, which is entitled Magnifica Humanitas, warning that artificial intelligence needs to be disarmed, not abandoned, but stripped of the logics that turn it into an instrument of domination, digital slavery, or environmental damage. Couldn't just choose one of those things. He had to go for the Holy Trinity. His core message is that AI must serve human dignity, not the other way around. And while that was happening on the world stage, something much quieter was going on in my everyday working life. I'd shared a LinkedIn post with you about how AI was knocking somebody's writing confidence, and that if they continued to let tools like Claude or ChatGPT do too much of the work, they would start to feel less able to think and to write for themselves. I'm seeing similar tensions in my own work where leadership teams can seem a little bit impatient to grab the benefits of AI, the productivity, the cost savings, new products, while individual employees are still trying to find their feet and asking what it all means for how they develop their skills and their jobs. And I think combined, all of that really makes me think about this being a question of control and what being in control of AI really means for leaders right now. What do you think, Zoe?
So, with any change program, and of course, that's ultimately what AI is, I think leaders need to ask themselves those classic questions of what's in their control and what they can influence. So, as an example of that, you can obviously put in your policy you are only allowed to use these kind of tools, but you can't stop staff from accessing tools they shouldn't be using, like Shadow AI, on their phones, as an example.
Mm.
So you'd have to influence that instead. So, for any leaders out there right now who are absolutely panicking about AI, and believe me, I do work with leaders every day who are very understandably in that position, maybe start by writing yourself a little list. Draw a circle where you've got the things you can control, and then put the things that you can influence in that wider circle. And then there'll be the things which you can't do anything about. So I was talking to a CEO the other week who was going, "Oh, I'm really worried about some of the decisions that OpenAI are making and the work they're doing with, the US government and all these sorts of things." So I was like, well, you can't change that. Obviously, the thing that's in your control there is about whether you use these tools or not. That is the thing which is in your gift. No one's expecting you to solve all of these problems on your own.
Yeah. And I think sometimes for leaders, it's not that they don't want to put the work in, but they do want to get there quickly. So I think there is a speed thing here, isn't there, as well, that Leadership want to, as I said, see the benefits. They want to leap ahead to what this is actually going to do for their business or for their organization. Whilst employees, not universally, but generally, employees are a bit further behind the curve in their thinking about this.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think I see a little bit of different takes on that and different organizations. So I can absolutely understand why leaders they want to understand what's the value here, what's the return on investment. But it's really important to be looking at that in the right way. So I think what always worries me about this stuff, and there was a bit of that in some of the anthropic commentary, which has come through from this news story, is that all of this stuff about 10xing things, and we're moving to a point where you could have an organization that's got 100 staff and do the work of 10,000 people, whatever it is. That's a very extreme example of cost reduction. And I think, in terms of being in control, what I would counsel leaders to do is to remember there are lots of other benefits about AI. It's not just a race to the bottom in terms of how little you can spend on your staff team or how few people are doing the work compared to the number of agents who might be doing the work. So I think that those are the things that are in the control of leaders, the decisions they make about how they adopt these technologies. And I'd always urge leaders to do so in such a way that really sets themselves up well for the future, rather than doing something which is a bit of a sugar rush of, oh, we're really going to save money here and we can push this product out to market in 2 weeks rather than the 6 months it would normally take us. Always be asking yourself why, and how the how is in service of that.
Very good point, well made. And also,
Thank you.
just looking at the point from the note, looking at the interview from Jack Clark and the encyclical from the Pope, there's a general message there, I think, of which I think is interesting and I think is fairly hopeful actually. There's two organizations there, very different very different audiences, or some of the same
Uh,
audience, but very different
Different
audiences and very
vibes.
different
I think it's fair to
different
say
scopes,
different
different
vibes.
vibes. But taking that step back, which I think is really interesting, and starting to think about where does this start to influence beyond the expectations that those organizations, particularly if you think about Anthropic, the initial aims of what they set out to achieve, and then the outcomes that what they have built is starting to generate for the general population and influence across those organizations, particularly places like the Catholic Church and religion, and what it means for massive societal issues.
It's really interesting. I mean, whatever you think of the Pope and, and his sort of thoughts on the church, let's not get into that here. But I thought this was
No.
really thought provoking. Yes, too big for this podcast. I thought it's genuinely very thought provoking. I actually welcome this kind of discussion because it's really about, as you say, the societal impact of this technology. I thought there were some very interesting points in his encyclical about the dignity of work. We can automate the heck out of this, but actually, at the end of the day, people need a purpose when they get up in the morning. And that's really important. So I thought it was really good to have this bigger picture conversation about AI because, frankly, so much of the AI conversation at the moment is very dominated by these billionaires from Silicon Valley, and they have a particular lens through which they look at the world. And probably a narrower lens than some of them realize. So I thought the Pope brought some really interesting insights to this. And I like the fact it was a wider conversation about morals and how this is going to have an impact on people rather than look at my new product. It's so exciting.
Yeah, and he can tell us all about it when he's on our next episode, of course.
Well, we would be delighted to host him as a guest. I mean, he's clearly the Pope has shown he's got some very interesting views on emerging technology. Always happy to speak to Pope Leo if his people are listening.
We'll get in touch. And also that smaller story, as I said, that communications professional within my network who posted about how she was suffering from a bit of a knock in confidence because she was using AI to help with her writing and just basically losing confidence in her ability to write. And I guess that triggered for me, within this context of the conversation we've just had, the thought about we'd had this discussion on our last episode about how much we hand over to the machine, if you like, and how much we reserve for us. And
Mm,
I think the conversation that the Pope is generating touches into that area as well.
Oh, yeah, 100%, because this is really at the heart of how humans partner with these technologies, right? And how that's fundamentally going to change so many jobs. So actually his point about human dignity and purpose and well-being is really, really key, isn't it? So
Yeah,
let's hope we hear more from the Pope on AI. I will look forward to that.
I'm going to subscribe to his RSS feed like it's the old days.
Has he got a podcast? Because if he hasn't got one, he needs to get one. If he really wants to influence in this day and age, he needs a microphone. That's what he needs.
The Popecast,
The Popecast. Yes. You've got the Pope Mobile. Next logical step, definitely the Popecast.
definitely.
This leads us nicely to our interview with Pip Wilson, because this is the space Pip is operating in, using technology and AI to make a tough process fairer and more human without handing everything over to machines. So, now to our conversation with Pip Wilson. We are delighted to be joined by Pip Wilson from Amicable on Starts to the Top today. Pip is the co founder and CEO of Amicable and a successful tech entrepreneur, director, angel investor, and startup mentor. She takes overall responsibility for driving the business, i.e., Amicable, forward and defining the tech strategy to sustain Amicable's track record of delivering new and innovative ways to automate and improve the end to end journey to make Amicable the kindest and best way to divorce or separate. Her entrepreneurial journey includes co founding Bluefin Solutions, an SAP consultancy, which she successfully exited to Mindtree in 2015. Beyond Amicable is a proactive angel investor, actively supporting and promoting female led businesses. She has also contributed significantly to philanthropy, having served as a trustee for multiple charities, including as deputy chair of the RSA. Pip, welcome to Start to the Top. We're delighted to have you here.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very pleased to be here.
We're delighted to have you here. And I was saying to Paul the other day, especially delighted because I was out in London doing a client visit the other day, and then a bus with Amicable on it went past the other day. So I thought, oh, this is a sign. This is very timely, and it's all pointing towards our conversation coming up with you soon. And I think what's so interesting behind that is it looks like the brand is getting bigger. You're obviously really going places as a business. You've got this very innovative idea, and we're really keen to dig more into how all of that came about today. And it's really interesting because it's actually underpinned by this very human story, isn't it? Your co founder, Kate, went through a couple of divorces, one of which was especially tough. So we'd love to hear the origin story of Amicable and how it came about.
Absolutely. So, yes, as you said, my co founder, Kate Daly, who's actually an old friend, we've known each other through NCT because we had kids at the same time. And a few years after kind of getting to become friends, she went through her second divorce. The first one had been very straightforward, kind of not long after university, and they were both very young. The second one was a lot more complicated and, in her own words, kind of a bit of a train wreck. They ended up in the High Court. They spent an awful lot of money. And afterwards, Kate had kind of looked around and thought, how did that go so wrong? And realized that it wasn't anything they'd done. It was actually the process that had led them down this path and kind of increased the acrimony and made it into something that was hugely worse than where either of them had kind of intended it to go. So she retrained as a family consultant and was helping couples who were going through the process in order to try and keep it on track. And we'd talked about it a lot. I thought what she was doing was brilliant, but was only ever going to be scalable if you use technology in order to reach a lot more people. And the timing happened to be pretty good because we just exited my first business, and I was like, oh no, I'd like to do this all again. And so kind of the idea for Amicable was born. And we think it's sort of the combination of what Kate brings in terms of psychology and I bring the kind of technology side that has meant we've got kind of very complementary skill sets. in order to be able to create something that was kind of unique within the industry.
That's amazing that this fantastic example of innovation came out of such a challenging time.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the kind of, I mean, ultimately, divorce is such a human experience, and the people who understand it the best are going to be somebody who's been through it. And I mean, I've always had a view that businesses should come from that real understanding of a subject and how to do things in a different way and think about it in a different way. And if something good can come out of what was a kind of a very difficult thing to go through, not just for her, but for her family and friends watching it, etc., then that's great. And you mentioned at the start our buses, which has been really interesting because they just seem to be memorable. I think people don't expect to see divorce on a bus, so even though yeah, there's not that many. When they get spotted, they always get noticed. Yeah, we've been very pleased about that. But that whole campaign, and we had a few tube ads and things as well, was all about reaching out to friends and family. Because what we recognised right from the start is that divorce doesn't just impact the individuals going through it, it impacts everyone who's been connected to them. And therefore, you can not just make something better for a couple or family with kids, but also kind of a wider group of people.
So there's this wider ripple effect, as you say, isn't there? And that only increases the impact of what you do. So can you tell us a bit about how amicable works in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I tend to describe us as kind of tech enabled services in that although we see a lot of what we do as technology, ultimately we're dealing with people and we're dealing with people going through a very difficult time. And right now, I think that is something that for a lot of customers, you can't do just with technology. You need to have that person to help you through the difficult kind of emotional bit. We do a couple of different things and we're expanding to kind of to help on a lot more of the journey, but the kind of the original and still the biggest part of the business is to help a couple together as they go through the process. And that's the really, I guess, innovative part of what we do. Whereas a solicitor will work with one of you and your ex will have to have a different solicitor, we work with a couple together. Now, sometimes that's just doing the paperwork and managing the process for them. But for a large amount of customers, it's actually facilitating their negotiations. So we're working with the two of them together to get them from a starting point of, well, what in principle do you want to achieve? What is going to be most important to the two of you when it comes to moving forwards with your life? Right the way through to having signed agreements that have been to the court, that have been stamped by a judge, and that give you that legal certainty as to how you move forwards. And the combination of our people and the technology behind that is what's helping that couple through that journey.
That's much needed, isn't it? As you say, because I used to be a lawyer a very long time ago, and whenever we had to go with our clients to court, it really struck me how it hadn't evolved very much from the era of Bleak House. No offense to any judges or barristers listening. But as you say, it's often people working with the best of intentions in a very antiquated system, isn't it? So you're obviously trying to get people to do things differently in a really innovative way. What's it like trying to create disruption and change in a world that perhaps hasn't evolved that much since the 1800s?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right that it hasn't changed and in some ways is getting worse. And the cost, and this was the stat that blew me away right from the start. The cost is about 52 billion a year to the UK taxpayer paying for relationship breakdown. So that's you, me, anyone listening. And I think it comes to something like £220 per person over the course of the year. And that covers courts, it covers services that go with that, it covers kind of mental health, it covers people with time off sick, etc. So all of that cost to society. So it's a huge problem. And the more people who have a better experience, that genuinely has an impact on reducing that cost. And the courts are getting worse. It's fairly well publicised that there are huge delays actually getting a court date. There are issues with things being called off at the last moment, and we hear some horror stories where someone will kind of have a date. They'll wait 9 months for a date, and then it will get cancelled due to lack of court space or lack of judges a few days before, and then they're back waiting again. So it's certainly something that we wouldn't recommend to anyone, and feel if we can be part of the solution in terms of finding a different route for people, then we're doing a kind of what we do has a massive benefit to society as a whole, not just to the kind of people who become our amicable customers.
And how is the profession, the legal profession itself, reacting to you in the market as a disruptor?
Interesting question, Paul. I think it's mixed, and we've certainly had at some times some pushback, and I mean, right at the start, there was quite a lot of kind of, I guess, cynicism or sometimes even concern about what we were doing, to the extent, and I don't know. I mean, this was quite well publicised at the time, but obviously quite a long time ago now, where we ended up in the High Court because the a couple of the judges didn't necessarily take objection to what we were doing, but were concerned as to whether it was something that could happen or not. And so they basically referred a couple of our cases to go to the most senior judge to be able to make a ruling. And he overwhelmingly ruled to say, no, this is absolute right. This is the type of innovation we need within society. So what for us was kind of, as you can imagine, quite concerning when we got the letters through, actually turned out to be a very positive experience, and something that made it much clearer as to where the lines were and what we could do. Since then, I think some lawyers see us as a threat. Quite a lot don't, and actually, we get referrals from lawyers when they have people who come to them who, for whatever reason, aren't right for them, or they know what they want to do, or they haven't got the budget to be able to afford two separate lawyers, and they're kind of in line, etc. And we will now get quite a few customers sent directly to us. There's not a kind of single view across the legal profession, and ultimately, innovation and disruption are happening on all fronts, aren't they? So, yeah, I don't think it's something that comes as a surprise that someone's doing something differently.
Yeah, I was going to say I did a bit of Googling in preparation to speak to you and saw some of those stories. And I think it was quite striking to see somebody saying, well, actually, this is helping the issue rather than anything else. I think it was very, very clear and good to see. And as you said, disruption in the space. I work with professional services organizations on strategy, and one of the things that keeps coming up time and time again is AI. And you're bringing AI into the platform and into the process that you run. So, how is that starting to play a part as well in this emotionally charged process that you're smoothing out for people here?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, I mean, I think AI is transformational for what we do, but only when used in the right place. For a start, I mean, access to justice shouldn't depend on who can afford the most adversarial approach, or who can afford to do things in a certain way. So technology gives us a chance to rebalance that. It gives us a chance to help different groups of people in a different way. So, for example, one of the things that we built actually in combination with a charity called Restored Lives. We built a chatbot for kids whose parents are going through divorce. And this chatbot is trained only on material provided by the charity. So it doesn't run the risk of people going and getting or kids going to get stuff. And it's only aimed at teenagers, but it's like, if you're going through, or your parents are going through that, that can be a really lonely place to be. And there's not many resources out there because it's not a segment of the population that can be monetized particularly easily. So actually, we could use our technical knowledge and our AI skills in order to work with the charity that had the material in order to provide something that's a really valuable service. And I think we've had 38,000 hits since it's launched, which wasn't that long ago, of people who are going in, using the chatbot, getting referred if needed to services that can help them further, etc., and helping them cope with what is difficult. So areas like that, it's an access to justice. For us internally, it allows us to be more efficient. It allows us to create new products more rapidly, to be able to help people with more of the journey, to be able to kind of help them with different areas. But what it doesn't replace is the need for a person to help when you're going through some of those negotiations or some of the more tricky parts of the journey. And I think it's hugely exciting what the opportunity is and how technology can kind of make our team's time go further. But that means they can help more people with the moments that really need that human touch.
Yeah, and I think it's huge, isn't it? Hugely disrupting the professional services world, accountants, lawyers. But I think for my money, lawyers more than anything, because I think you are getting people who are approaching legal challenges, whether it's a divorce, whether it's buying a house or whatever it might be, and turning to ChatGPT and chatbots to have that initial view of what happens next. I have a small example myself of a friend who is a builder who wanted to create an employee handbook and was asking me about, could you help me to use AI to get a first draft that you then might take to an employment lawyer and get the I's dotted. I's dotted, the T's crossed, and get that finalised by some expert views. But I imagine more and more people turning up at the doors of their lawyers saying, well, this is my first draft, can you help me to improve this?
Yeah, yeah, and you do get that. I mean, I think if a couple of use that to help them negotiate, help them reach a view, then great, because that means their communication is probably good. They'll be able to co-parent successfully. It is definitely not a bad thing. There's a big step from that to being something that the court would then accept, because for it to be something that is then a legally binding order, which is what you need at the end of the divorce, it has to be written with certain precedents, it has to be structured in a certain way, etc. So what we've done is kind of use AI to help with some of that initial drafting, etc., behind the scenes, but we still have trained solicitors who are checking it, going through everything, checking everything, understanding exactly what the customers want in order to provide that middle layer. So we can use it to keep costs as reasonable as possible. And I believe, and in some ways hope, because I think it's important for society that this will prevent it, like it will keep costs down. It will ensure that everybody has to kind of make sure that all professionals' advice is reasonable. And from our perspective, it will allow us to help more people.
It's a huge differentiator, isn't it, that cost, in given the stats that I was reading around the average cost of a divorce in the UK versus what the service that you provide.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of around 8 to 9,000 pounds each, if and that's without going to court. If you're using separate solicitors in order to get divorced, we charge our maximum service is 5,900 for a couple, and that includes VAT. It's transparent. Some of the things that we've done that we think make the biggest difference to our customers, and certainly the feedback is really positive. It's just that transparency. It's just that making it very clear what it's going to cost you. All of our services are fixed price. You can pay over 10 months for the more expensive services. So people can budget. They're not going to get a surprise invoice through at the end of the month that is twice as much as they were expecting it to be, and doesn't include VAT, which is always a big shock.
Yeah.
And I mean, I absolutely believe that the fact that it's been possible for a lot of the professional services industries to work in the same way for such a long length of time is something that really needs to change from kind of a society perspective. And we're certainly looking at kind of where we can help with connecting areas too. So we're part of the Octopus group. We work very closely with Octopus Money. And that allows us to be able to also offer things like pension reports and financial advice, financial planning, mortgages, etc., which again make a big difference to customers. Because if you're getting divorced, you don't want to have to keep going around and finding different suppliers for different things. You literally just want the whole process to be as smooth as possible so that you can focus on the human part, the emotional part, because that's ultimately what you and often kids, if they're involved, are going through. And that's where you need to spend your time and effort. So the least friction from the kind of practical and legal and financial bits, the easier the process is for the people involved.
And that's so exciting because it feels like Amicable are using AI to kind of democratize law, because you talked about some of the challenges that people face going through the process of divorce, how they can feel like they're not really in control, they're spending an awful lot of money in a very stressful situation where they may end up feeling as if they're in even more of a conflict with their partner rather than the other way round. It's really exciting that you're getting people to that point. So I wanted to bring some of that back actually to all the other hats you've worn as a leader actually. So you're obviously a serial tech entrepreneur, you're an angel investor, you're also a female leader in tech. If you could go back and share what you've learned with your younger self, what would you want them to know?
I think it's interesting because it kind of ties in very much to my investment philosophy. And I don't know when this first clicked on, probably when we started Amicable actually, but I very much feel that the businesses that will survive and thrive will be the businesses that combine a social purpose with a kind of clear financial goal and ability to kind of make money. And it's not enough to have a business that's only purpose is how much money we're going to make and how quickly we're going to make it. And yeah, there are a few that have done that, and there are a few very big tech companies that have done that. But there's also a huge amount that haven't made it when that's what they were going. Um, it was, I mean, my previous business was a consultancy firm. So it was it was quite a kind of standard business model. A lot of businesses were at that time a kind of a very traditional company setup. And it was only when we sold that and I was looking as to what was in the market and what was around, and I was looking at being an angel investor as well. And I realized that I had no interest in backing businesses from an angel perspective that's purpose was just, yeah, oh, we're going to make lots of money. We're going to be the next social network, or we're going to be the next tech robotics, or whatever it was. But there was so many businesses that all seemed to be pretty much the same and the same philosophy. And the ones that I was interested in were the ones that said, no, actually, this is a real social problem, and this is our solution to solve it. And I know, I mean, obviously, I've been involved in the charitable sector. I know you do a huge amount in that, Zoe, and there's some amazing charities, but it's a hard place to be as well, especially at the moment to be in the charitable sector. And actually, if you can combine something that makes a difference to society with a commercial purpose, that then becomes really interesting. And I definitely didn't realize it for the first kind of 15 or so years of my professional life, but it's been one of the most rewarding things of the last 10 to 15 years.
And you've set Amicable up as a B Corp. What does that mean to you and to the business?
We're really proud of our B Corp status. So, yeah, we didn't, I mean, we became a B Corp 2 and a bit years ago. And it's quite a difficult process to go in. It's not a badge that can be gained kind of lightly. We're lucky enough to be part of the Octopus Group, and the whole Octopus Group is a B Corp. So it was very much kind of something that we did in conjunction with them. But to us, it's a mark that we are doing as much as possible right to be a organisation that kind of gives back to society and doesn't overuse in terms of sustainability, pays fairly, looks after people, and does all these things that, I mean, this is my second business. I wouldn't have done it for the second time if I didn't feel passionate that we were going to kind of do it in the right way. B Corp is kind of part of that. And it's a nice community. I mean, what's really nice is we've partnered with a couple of B Corps, and actually, if we're looking for a partner, that's one of the things that we'll check. And we've had people reach out to us for exactly the same way to go, "Oh, you're a fellow B Corp. Be good. It would be great to work together because you know that they've been through that rigorous checking. You know that they've kind of that it's not just a box ticking. It's taking quite a lot of effort to get to that point."
Only going to get harder with the new rules that they're bringing in, the new standards that are addressing it. It's funny because I was just going to say when you were talking about the reward of working within the charitable sector, and I work well. I do sometimes. I do quite a lot of work with charitable organisations. We're nowhere near as much as Zoe, but the predominant work that I do is with accountants, and that sort of profit and purpose conversation is a fairly live one within that industry. But the firm I'm working with most closely at the moment is a recent addition to the B Corp world, and we're setting their strategy for the next couple of years with a view to really embedding that even more in order to make sure that they can retain that status in the next couple of years. So that has been a sort of a breath of fresh air within the industry that I tend to work with as a sort of a balance between that profit making entity, but also with purpose, which brings me much closer to Zoe's world and makes me feel a bit warmer and a bit fuzzier.
Yeah, and it very much is. It's an interesting thing. I think the way the scoring works in B Corp as well, there is that very much anyone who's just become a B Corp, it's like, how can we get more points next time? And how can we cement it? And certainly, yeah, we started our B Corp discussions pretty much as soon as you've kind of got the status, you start it again for next time.
And interesting that you'll look at, because that's part of the conundrum, or part of the question at the moment, is looking at the B Corp community as a way of connecting responsible businesses with each other and creating that supply chain. That I think is a really interesting model. Zoe, you and I should think about it.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
And so, with all of that in mind, with your background and the work that you've done in the past and the work you're doing with Amicable, and the investment into AI and all of the things that are happening and on the horizon, what are the plans then for Amicable in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we are super excited about, well, I guess where we are now, and Zoe, you mentioned right at the start about the fact that the brand has got to the point now where it's certainly within London, we feel like we are very well known, and that is kind of going around the country too. But we feel we've also got a huge potential to move forwards as well. I mean, we started Amicable to change how people end relationships. But actually, we also think there's an opportunity to help couples make decisions earlier too. So when they move in together, buy a home together, get married, stay unmarried, it's actually how do you set those relationships up for success? How do you do any of the legal or financial practical steps at the time that you need to? So that might be cohabitation agreements, which with more people not getting married is something that's really growing, or helping with separating, or helping with co-parenting, or actually life after divorce. And so we're launching a series of products this year. We've already launched cohabitation agreements. We already do quite a bit of co-parenting, and we've got a kind of community for those who've been through divorce who are now moving forwards in order to be able to kind of help people across the whole kind of relationship life cycle. 1 in 5 couples living together in the UK aren't married or in a civil partnership, and that number is growing. And actually, I think last year the stat came out that more kids were born to couples who weren't married than were married, and their families, they need the same calm, structured, kind of affordable support. And we feel that we can help people again with that mixture of technology and humans where humans are needed to help kind of make their better decisions and handle the kind of practicalities with their relationships. So that's where the evolution is going. And I think where AI helps is kind of accelerating that and enabling that. But we just need to keep listening and evolve alongside the people we look after to see how they want help and how we can kind of continue to help them as they go forward. One of my things that makes me most proud every day is like reading our trust pilots and seeing what our customers say about us. And we know that there's on the whole a huge amount of kind of trust, and they love that we've helped them through what is a really difficult time. So now it's about, well, how can we expand and help people through that whole kind of relationship cycle? I'm very excited about it. I think, yeah, the opportunity and potential is huge.
Yeah, I love that because what you've described there is a whole system of support that's designed around what the end user needs. Whereas I guess the traditional way of moving through the legal system, and when I say this as someone who's an ex lawyer, it can sometimes feel like the system is designed around what lawyers need and what courts need rather than the people who are really at the sharp end of what's going on. So that sounds incredibly exciting.
Absolutely. So the way I describing it to someone the other day is that I think professional services companies tend to sell products. So a lawyer will sell a product, whether that product is a separation agreement, or a divorce. Agency firms might sell doing your tax return or doing, but it will be a product. Whereas actually humans have problems that they need solving. So my problem might be I'm moving house, or I'm moving in with a partner. We're not married. My mum's giving us 200K. They're not bringing anything. And we want to set this up for success so we don't have relationship difficulties down the line. Now, that's the problem. They might not actually know what product they need. And the products they might need in that case is conveyancing, cohabitation agreement, or deed on the house to say that the money's come from this place, and a bit of kind of counselling so that they're both clear on what the implications are. And if they do that, then they've got that all financially done and they've got the legal stuff done, and they might need a mortgage as well. So what they need is a mixture of financial and legal products. But what they've got is just a human problem that they need some help with. So I think if we can approach it in that way, we can provide a service that's very different from anything that currently exists in the market.
Oh, I love that. I think there's such a heart to what you're doing and what you've created. Sense of empathy for people is right at the center of it, isn't it?
That's the idea, Zoe. I mean, we're human and we're helping humans go through stuff. So I think that hopefully is a different way of approaching it than the kind of standard.
That's brilliant, Pip. Thank you so much. It's so exciting to hear about how you've developed Amicable, the place you've got it to, and all your wonderful plans for the future. And great to hear that AI is such a big part of that as well. We'd love to hear how it all goes. It's super exciting.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming
Thank you.
on.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'll be keeping my eye out for those London buses as well.
Great stuff. Thank you. Many thanks to Pip for joining us on the podcast. I found that really enlightening and interesting. And it's a fascinating look behind the doors at Amicable's success story. So thank you to Pip and her team for making this happen.
Yes, many thanks to Pip, a really interesting business. And I wonder what it signals for the democratisation of other parts of the legal profession in the future. I was quite interested and taken with that, working with professional services firms as I do. As always, we really do appreciate that you've listened all the way to the end of the episode. Thank you very much. You can support our podcast by leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to us. It really does help us to reach more people. So if you've enjoyed what you've heard, do share it with a friend or a colleague.
Thank you so much for listening today. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time with a brand new episode of Starts at the Top.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.